Hey, how's it going? Welcome to another MLittleProgramming tutorial. In today's video, we're going to be taking a look at Python error handling, what Python error handling is, the use cases for error handling, the syntax for error handling, how we can use multiple exceptions in our Python code, and if you stick around to the end of the video, we'll look at how we can define an output that prints regardless of our error handling process. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel if you want to see more of this type of content. Let's jump straight into it. So, where would we need to use error handling? Well, a good place to start would be to have an error. If you've been following this series along, you may remember in the last video we were casting types in Python. Now, if you try to cast a string of text to an integer like this in Python and run the program, Python throws an ugly error like so. Within this error, it actually tells us the specific type of error that was caused. That error is here, value error. We'll be using this later when we look at how to deal with specific errors. Now, if we had users of this program, we wouldn't want them to be exposed to an error like this. Error handling in Python allows us to customize this error that is displayed to the user when an error would usually be displayed. So, what's the syntax? Well, error handling in Python takes the form of a try except block. We put the code that we think could error inside this try block. To demonstrate this, above the try except block, we'll create a variable, call it text, and assign it to the string MLittleProgramming. Now, what could potentially cause an error is if we try to cast this variable to an integer. So, in the try block is where we'll put the code where we would cast from a string to an integer. So, in the try block, we'll pass our text variable into the int constructor. Now we need to sort out what we're going to do when this eventually does error. To do that, we need to change this except block. If we leave the except statement as it is, so this line, then we are going to catch every single error. To start with, we'll leave it blank. Inside this block is where we can customize the error we actually show to the user when an error is caused. So inside this block, we're just going to print the statement, error. However, because we've told Python what to do when we would usually get an error, we actually just print error. Obviously, in our example, every time this block of code is run, we will always cause an error. Of course, we're writing these exceptions in the case that an error occurs. That means for most of the time, we don't expect to be throwing errors. So what does happen when our try case doesn't throw an error? Well, if we change the argument from our text argument to a string, but that string is going to be the number 1, we are able to cast a string that is a number to an integer, so this should not throw an error. So if we run this now, we simply don't get an error, and the code runs as if this try except block of code wasn't there. Now let's go back to what we had just a minute ago, and start to get more specific with our except cases. To be more specific with our except cases, we specify the type of error we want to catch next to the except keyword. So now if we remember back to the earlier in the video when we tried passing a string of text into the int constructor, the specific error that occurred was that there was a value error. Now, in our except case, we can specify this as the error we want to catch. This means that when this type of error occurs, we can tell Python to take a specific action. Now we know that when a value error occurs is because a user has passed into a constructor a value which has a type that can't be casted into the desired type. So after catching the error, we can print this type, can't be casted, or something similar, which gives the user a nicer error message than the one we had before. This means that we can deal with different types of errors. Now of course, there may be a wide range of errors that we cannot specify to catch, and so after defining a few specific errors to catch, we may want to do a catch-all except clause, which Python allows us to do. To show this, we need another error. Another error that we can cause when dealing with typecasting is a type error. A type error can occur when we try to pass 2 arguments into the constructor. If we run this now, we again get an ugly error message. You can see down here it says, type error, string object cannot be interpreted as an integer. On a side note to the topic of this video, you may be wondering what is the difference between a type error and a value error. A type error occurs when an operation or function is applied to an object of an inappropriate type. A value error occurs when a built-in operation or function receives an argument that has the right type but an inappropriate value. So in this case, the constructor int is only supposed to take 1 argument, and so when we supply 2 arguments, it looks for another function in scope that takes 2 arguments. And this error has occurred because the type of the arguments it is expecting were not matched by what we passed in. Previously, we received a value error when we tried to pass in a string into the constructor. This is because we can pass string arguments into the int constructor, but the strings have to contain values that can be converted to an integer. Back to error handling in Python now. So to catch all errors, like before, we simply type the keyword except followed by a colon. Inside this clause, we are catching all errors, so we can simply print something like there was an error of some kind. So if we run this again, because we are not causing a value error or a syntax error, we enter the catch all except clause and print there was an error of some kind. There are some additional syntax features that you can use within your Python error handling other than try except. The first we will look at is the keyword finally. If a finally is defined, the code inside of it will be executed regardless if the try block raises an error or not. So if we were to add a finally clause to our code, and inside it print the try catch has been executed, this would run whether the code within the try block caused an error or not. To show this, we'll run the code we've currently got that causes a type error, and we will see that there was an error of some kind has been printed, because we have caused an error that hasn't been specified in our other except clauses. And the try catch has been executed statement has also been printed because the finally clause executes whether we have caused an error or not. On the flip side, if we were to come into our try block and correct this casting so it didn't cause an error, and instead pass in an integer as a string, and we run this, we'll see that the try catch has been executed statement is printed because the finally clause will still execute even when there's no error being caused. If we only wanted to print a message to the user if we didn't cause an error, we can use the else piece of syntax. The code inside an else block will not run if there's no error caused by the code inside this try block. The use case of else could be that we wanted to print something like there was no error caused on completion of our try except block. So if we were to run this code now, there was no error caused would be printed as there's no error that has been caused in the try block. However, if we were to cause any of the errors we've seen so far in this video, we wouldn't see anything printed on the program. And that's just about it for Python error handling. I'll put a link to the code you've seen in this video in the description down below. Thank you for watching the video this far. I hope you got a lot of value from it. If you'd like to see more Python programming tutorials, there will be a link in the description down below to a playlist of Python programming tutorials. With that said, if you like the video, if you could drop a like on the video, it would be much appreciated as it really helps the channel, and subscribe to see new Python programming tutorials every week. Also, if you've got any questions about the video, drop a comment down below and I'll get back to you. Have a great day.